Now here to share his thoughts on how living with faith really improved his personal life, his business life, is Carlos Sepulveda. Carlos is the chairman of the Dallas-based Triumph Financial, chairman of the board of directors for Cinemark Holdings, director of the board for Travel Research Advisors. He's also director of the board for Interstate Batteries. Let's all welcome Carlos to the stage. Up?
I think I am. Okay, good. Meredith, I can't tell you how excited I am for you and I to have a little private chat with 900 of our closest friends here.
Same. I feel the exact same. You know, originally you were going to do a keynote, and they said, Meredith, he wants to do a Q&A. I said, well, great. So we got on the phone this week, and I have to tell you, talking to you really reframed my day. It was like, you know, when you talk to somebody and you feel so blessed and so full, honestly, of the Spirit. I felt that way when I got off the phone, so thank you.
Well, I'm happy to be able to do something for the Salvation Army, and I hope that comes out as we have a chance to chat.
You have a powerful story, obviously business story, but I want to talk about your personal life. You started off in an abusive home as a child, ultimately left at the age of 15 and went out on your own. Walk us through those early days.
Well, yes, thank you. I want to be clear that I understand many people have elements of this to their story, so I'm not thinking that this is unique to me. And it was, I guess, about 12 years ago, I was speaking at a different fundraiser, and Michael Powell heard me share some of my early days, and Michael asked me if I'd do that today. And if you know Michael, and I respect and esteem her, I'm going to do what Michael says. So that's how this happened. Well, yes, I was born in Houston, the fourth child of a family, the only son. My family relocated to El Paso shortly thereafter. Maybe I was 3 and 4 at the time. I came to a greater awareness in El Paso. It was a tough environment in the family. It was broken, it was dysfunctional, it was unsafe. My father abused alcohol and prescription drugs. Associated bouts of violence followed that, some extreme. My mother, bless her heart, she was a high school chemistry teacher at the time. My dad was a lawyer, independent lawyer. My mother became convinced that my father was potentially going to kill her, either accidentally or on purpose. So with that, after a 13-year marriage, she divorced. It was very hard for her to do that, but she divorced, and I was 7 years old at the time. That whole situation had such a lingering impact on my mother that many years later, when I was in college, she would end up annulling the marriage, still seeking healing from that. But going back in time, I lived with my mother until the age of 15. We'd been in Austin, Texas, moved to Oklahoma City. I was fortunate enough to make varsity after my freshman year in Austin, moving to Oklahoma City. I was fortunate enough to make
in football,
varsity.
Right?
Football, right.
He was a really good football player,
well,
being humble.
The competition was much less back then, so it's not that big of a deal. But then in Oklahoma City, I was fortunate to make varsity again, just having moved there, so I was able to start. Football season ended on Friday. I wrote my mother a note on Monday, checked myself out of school, and drove as a 15-year-old, unlawfully, I understand that, from Oklahoma City to El Paso. Reconnected with my dad there. He was on his second marriage. He would have 4, 5 more after that, depending on your accounting, either legal or common law. And after 9 weeks there with my dad, I told him, this isn't going to work out. My future's not here. We had a landmark conversation, 45-year-old lawyer, 15-year-old only son. He says, hey, your future is here with me. I said, no, it's not. He goes, it is. I said, Dad, I'm sorry, it's just not. He goes, well, Carlos, what exactly is it you want out of life? And I said, Dad, that's easy. I just want God's will for my life. My dad looked at me, and I'll sanitize this. He says, man, you're really screwed up. And I said, yeah, I might be, but time will tell. So I'd come to a saving knowledge of Jesus at the age of 14. Perhaps we'll get into that. But anyway, so then I left El Paso, went back to Austin, found the football coach. He was excited I was back. I said, hey, before we get too excited, I need a job and I'll find a place to live. He helped me find a job bagging groceries at the age of 15. I did that. I worked 5 days a week. I found a very sweet family, very meager. They had an 8x8 room they weren't using. I paid them room and board. Happiest I'd ever been in my life. I focused on academics, athletics, and work. And one of the best things that came out of that, getting back to Austin, is I met Susan Bridges, and she's now been Susan Sepulveda for 44 and a half years. So it worked out. And I do want to say that having gone through that, very significantly, my father and my mother independently, many years later, trusted Jesus before they passed. So there's a great ending to a sad story.
Tell us a little bit about how faith came into your life. I know were you 14 years old? Did you feel so out of control, right, in your life at home, and someone gave you a Bible?
Exactly. Yeah, we had a marginal existence. I mean, we had a rent house on a busy street in Austin. We were 2 houses down from the junior high. And I was sharp enough to know that, hey, this is marginal. So I tried not to cause trouble, but I'm just a knucklehead like every other 10-year-old boy. But somebody saw me and said, hey, I'm going to give this kid a good news for modern man. 10 years old. So I got a good news for modern man, New Testament English translation. And I didn't have much going on, so I read it. So I remember distinctly one night, I'm reading it, and Matthew 17:20, the 17th chapter of Matthew, verse 20. The disciples are going to Jesus, and they're kind of whining about why they couldn't cast this demon out of this boy. And Jesus responds, 17:20 says, Jesus replied, I tell you the truth. Oh, Jesus replied, it's because you have so little faith. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Matthew 17:20. And I'm 10 years old, and I'm reading that, and I said, well, that's audacious. That's what is faith? That's audacious. And so I'm sitting there, and I said, well, I can't make a mountain move, but there's a lamp over there, so I ought to be able to make that at least wiggle. And so I'm like trying to make that lamp wiggle. I'm 10 years old, and you know what happened? Nothing. Not a blasted thing. Very appropriately. And so I just said, as a 10-year-old boy, I said, hey, Jesus, I don't understand this, but maybe could I have that kind of faith? And I don't know. Maybe that set off some things. But many years later, like maybe, 20 years ago, I was hanging out in the 2nd chapter of Acts, and I looked at it, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. And if you read the 2nd chapter of Acts, it's Pentecost. It's the kickoff of the church, the Holy Spirit coming on the Jews that had gathered at that time. And verse 32 talks about the facts of Jesus' death, resurrection, ascension. Verse 37 talks about how when Peter presented that to them, it cut them to the heart. And then you keep reading, and then 3,000 came to faith in Jesus that day. And so I looked at that and I went, wow, facts made an authentic impact, and they trusted him. F-A-I-T-H. Faith. And I just thought, that's biblical faith. It's based on facts. It's not based on hope so. No, it's based on facts. It makes an authentic impact, and people end up trusting him.
I mean, you were 15 years old, and you're living with a family that just took you in on chance, right? And you have this young faith within you. You're smart. So you also are a good football player. You got some scholarships to play football in college and an academic scholarship to University of Texas. Is that right? And you said, you know what? I think I'm going to go with the academic scholarship. And sure enough, you did.
I was, like I said, I didn't want to cause trouble because I was so thrilled. That father had an individual plumbing truck. He'd put his hand on my door at 6:30 in the morning, and before he could open that door, I was on my feet making the bed. And I did that for almost 2 years. By the time I was a senior, I did it for over 2 years. By the time I'm a senior, I had like 6 weeks left before I graduated. He'd come in, open that door, I just lay there. He'd come back, hey, get up, I just lay there. And he goes, it should have been this way the whole time, which was awesome. But yes, I was fortunate. I had a football scholarship to Notre Dame, Texas, under Darrell Royal, OU, Barry Switzer, some other schools. But then I like to say Texas kind of messed up. I was fortunate enough to graduate second in my class from a competitive high school, and they gave me an academic scholarship. I'm 17. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to get paid the same either way? Pretty much. I thought, this is the most momentum I've had in my life. I'm going to go with the academic and keep working, which is what I did.
Did that. And then somehow you probably had mentors along the way that created the success in you today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was a student of the game, and I would look to see how people were living, and I would try to pay attention to what was happening around them. And I guess the greatest example would be my father. Growing up, I formulated my first, what I just call personal theory. And personal theory is something I use as a swing key, just to remind myself. And my first personal theory was that in life, you don't need one strategy, you need two separate strategies. One is insufficient. And the two strategies, the first one is to pursue and lay hold of things that are good. I call that P&L, pursue and lay hold of things that are good. And most people would say, well, that's awesome, just stop there, right? That would be worthwhile. But the second strategy, I think, is equally important, and I call that I and F. Identify and flee things that are bad. And it takes both. It's like two legs. It takes two to walk on. So my dad did, I think, well at pursuing and laying hold of some good things. I mean, he did a lot of progress from what he inherited from his parents, but he really fell short on the identify and flee part. So, yeah, I mean, I learned a lot of things to do by watching people. I mean, football coaches are amazing. Football coaches, God used to teach me many, many things. The value of teamwork, the value of investing, the value of preparation in advance. I love, Bud Wilkerson, when he was coach at OU, said, the will to win is not as important as the will to prepare to win. And that's true across life. So, I mean, football coaches are amazing. I was just hugging a football coach that I hadn't seen for a few years a couple of days ago. It was just, I got to look him in the eye and tell him how significant it was for the positive impacts he's made to our family.
And a lot of people call you coach, right? And
Yes.
you have a lot of personal theories to share with us. Can you give us a few?
Well, all right, so when I'm on my own, I just thought, all right, I'm 15, I'm on my own, and I've got some positive momentum, and I realized, wow, I can do anything. I can do anything. I'm totally unsupervised. Then the next thought I had was, I've got nothing. I can't do anything. So I'm able to do anything, but I can't do anything because I have no leverage. So I thought, well, this is interesting. So what am I going to do? I said, I'm not going to repeat where I came from, so let's go. Let's go. And I started coaching myself on that. And so watching others developing these personal theories, I shared one, P&L and INF is one. Another personal theory is that the battle for each day is won or lost in the morning. It is. I'm sorry. I mean, I've done it both ways. And no matter how busy I am, if I get a good start to my day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, where I can just calibrate the day, that just sets the whole day on a different path. Another one is you can always, and that's audacious, always, to say always, but I stand by it. You can always take a loss and turn it into a positive. You can always take a negative and turn it into a positive. And there are many examples of that. But one of my favorite coachings is Susan and I have 4 sons. They've married 4 wonderful ladies. Susan and I are UT Austin grads. They all went to Baylor. We still love them, 8 of them. The 4 sons, the 4 wives. We now have 16 grandkids. And the oldest one, when she was 13, I could tell, this one's going to be a looker. I mean, I just call balls and strikes. I realized,
a looker?
A good-looking woman. I just call balls and strikes. I understand I'm her granddad, but she's going to be beautiful. And so at 13, I said, Ashley, I want to be captain of Team Ashley. Are you okay with that? She goes, yeah. And so she calls me captain. I said, all right, Ashley, here's the first coaching. Every time I see you, here's what I want to hear from you. She goes, okay, Huggy. That's my granddad's name, Huggy. Okay, Huggy, what is it? I said, here's what I want to hear you say. Say the following. I'm not doing that. And so she goes, I'm not doing that. I said, no, Ashley, you're from East Texas. Add the twang. I'm not doing that. And so she says that. And I said, Ashley, that's perfect. And she goes, when will I know when to say it? And I said, well, if it enters your mind, you're probably a couple of minutes too late. You should have already gotten it out. So anyway, she's 16 now, and we have a wonderful relationship. But I mean, that's an example of coaching.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to talk about the Salvation Army.
Absolutely.
And how you first came to know about the Salvation Army. And it was through your dad, right? You have a really distinct memory of being in the car with him and passing a Salvation Army facility. And what did he say?
you just look at how God is so outrageously patient. I'd totally forgotten this memory until after Michael asked me to speak, and then I started reviewing things. And then I looked at the Salvation Army mission statement. I thought, I'm all over that mission statement. I love that mission statement. And then sitting there, I remember as a teenager being with my dad in the car, drove by something, and I already gave you a flavor of my dad, but he sees that and he goes, you know what? He goes, that is a really good institution. Those are really good people. And he says to me, Carlos, if you can ever do something good for them, you ought to do it. And I thought, that's over half a century ago. That's over 50 years ago, and I'd totally forgotten that. And I thought, so Dad, I'm here, buddy. I'm here. So.
Love it. And lastly, I mean, how did you break the cycle? I mean, you're such an incredible example of that. I know you through faith, right? But what was it? What was the moment? Who was the mentor? What was the thing?
14 years old, I hear the gospel. I go, you know what? Life sucks. This is painful. And I thought, this is what Jesus is about? I'd seen religion, but I hadn't understood that Jesus isn't interested in religion. He's interested in a relationship. He's interested in a relationship. And so being invited into a relationship is totally different. So I thought, okay, I'm in. Remember, I tried that lamp moving thing years earlier, and that didn't work. But I just thought, this is a relationship I want to enter. So I want to be very, very clear, very, very clear. I would be no different from my father absent the reality of Jesus Christ, period. And I even told my dad that before he passed. Nine months before he passed, he came to a saving knowledge of Jesus. He wrote it to me twice in 2 different notes. God put it on my heart to witness to him when I was in college. I would work for Continental Airlines so I could buy flight tickets for $25. We flew to San Francisco, $25 each, first class. We toured for like 3 days, and for 2 nights, we stayed in a hotel, and for 2 nights, I told him about Jesus. He'd tell me, I don't want to hear about that. I tell him, I understand, but I'm going to do it anyway, because you're my dad, and I'm on point. That it didn't take root then, but it took root years later. And so the answer to your question is Jesus Christ and all the things he does, all the people he's brought into my life, and just all the learning that flows from that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, hey, my pleasure.
You're such an inspiration to me.
No, Jesus Christ is the inspiration. I just happen to be the beneficiary of it.
Thank you for sharing your story.
All right.
And I just want to remind you today that we have an anonymous donor up to $100,000. Help me, Carlos. Help me, Carlos.
Hey.
Let's give today.
All right, we'll do 10 grand.
Oh, personally.
Is that what you meant by help?
Well, sure. I'll take it.
So,
I'll take it.
all right. Yeah, so I already told Michael, I'm sitting next to her. We did a table, 10 grand table. I already leaned over to her during that film. I said, Michael, next year we're getting a bigger table.
Yes.
So anyway, we'll do it right now. So we're in for 10.
Yeah, well,
more.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to you all for being here and for being so generous as you saw just the hope that the Salvation Army gives to so many people like Greg in our community is just inspiring. So thank you for your time and your generosity today, and may God bless you all. Have a great day.